So if you're like me, you usually enjoy watching YouTube because it's a good way of getting kind of some information, maybe some tutorials, and it used to be pretty good for long form stuff. However, maybe you have been noticing that it just seems like a constant battle these days. Everything is a narrative fight. Well, if that's of interest to you, I am going to explore that topic. So, everything always now seems like it's some part of narrative, and there's always these counter narratives to reinterpret it. I'm going to argue that I don't think this is a momentary thing. I think we are stalled out right now. I think this is going to remain the case for a while until we can recreate a shared sense of objective meaning. I think that this is a bigger problem that came from the vacuum of postmodernism. In postmodernism, we deconstructed everything. So everything now is up for interpretation. An easy example, I think, is take January 6th or the Kyle Rittenhouse event. Ask two people to watch the same video on Kyle Rittenhouse and then explain to you what happens in that video. Okay, it's all subjective now. It's all up for interpretation. There is no shared understanding of the world. Everything is up for new configurations to create new meanings, up for subversion. Now, you can kind of see this in postmodern art. There's pictures where they pull stuff from everything. It's all very eclectic. And that's kind of what's happening a little bit. But what I'm arguing is more from a Nietzschean point of view, that this is a deliberate in the sense that everybody who's involved in it is deliberately fighting for narrative control. That there is not an understood world of meaning that we can then extract from, but that the world is flat and meaningless, and all there is this creation of meaning. And that might have sounded all like fine and dandy back in the day, until you had to go, work at the grocery store or work a corporate job. Then life suddenly has a lot of meaning to it. Like your job sucks, and the traffic sucks, and but as we continuously are kind of moving online, this is a space where that kind of metaphysics can exist. That we have the online world is a world where there can be this new symbolic order of meaninglessness and only fighting. And so I'm going to start with a analysis of what objective meaning was, mainly based off of Jordan Peterson's studies and his maps of meaning, and how he was able to establish out of evolutionary psychology and his own psychological clinical training, and then using a mythological analysis to show how we had phenomenologically, meaning from our senses, from the phenomenon that hit us as an embodied being, how we were able to come to an agreed sense of meaning about certain things, and we would create that, or we would substantiate that meaning in our myths. And that lasted up through the Christian age. Dante, you get this nice cosmology, and it's not really until post WW2 that the deconstruction of objective meaning really began, and all meaning became subjected to propaganda, with mass media, with the effectiveness of these totalitarian powers and all the tools that came out of that. The USSR, the Nazis, the fascists, they all learned how to do mass media and how to manipulate on a mass scale. And the deconstructionists inadvertently, I think, ended up helping them, because they helped them destroy all meaning, and that makes you more vulnerable to agendas. And so that's what I'm going to kind of cover. If you're interested, stay tuned and follow me through this. Okay, so we'll do a couple more quick myths just to kind of flesh this out a little bit more. So we're all familiar with the hero myth of Jordan Peterson, so I won't go into that. Look quickly at the underworld, because I like the idea of Pluto and Hades. So as the god of both the underworld and the hidden riches of the underworld. He captures another phenomenological extraction. He represents what the ancients knew, that the precious metals and gems were found empirically underground. And so this is also at the same time the burial place. This is where decay and the earth is put below us. And so the natural symbolic location of death and mystery. The underworld becomes a place where both the dead and the treasures reside. What is most feared and what is most desired are co-located. This duality of danger and value in the same place corresponds to a basic structure of human experiences. The most significant opportunities are adjacent to the greatest threats. The mind collapses, the cave shelters and entombs. The unknown terrain offers predators. And so by personifying this domain as Hades, the myth encodes not only a cosmology where the dead resides, and it should also be mentioned that you have to cross the river Styx there, and so we have another like stable boundary of the universe, that gods can't even cross the river Styx. Only the god of message, Mercury, can cross the river Styx. Incidentally, just as a side note, it's also where Achilles' armor gets dipped. So this land of the dead is where what is most terrifying resounds, the unknown, the things that even the gods can't traverse, won't venture to. So Peterson repeatedly uses this motif of the treasure guarded by the dragon to capture this structure, where one must confront the unknown, the dragon of chaos or the underworld, in order to retrieve something of value, whether this is gold, knowledge, or a rescued loved one, as we have with the tale of Persephone. Then we have our creation myths. So the creation myths start with the formless void, oftentimes depicted as primordial waters, and this is what phenomenology would call the pre-thematic background. It is the undifferentiated there is, the experience of being before objects and relations are articulated. In Levinas, this is called the Ilia, and it's in the act of creation where the image of attention is given meaning, where God says, "Let there be light," and gives form to the formless. And so this brings some aspects of field into our focus as stable identity and relations. This is when the logos comes in. This is what we're trying to really kind of come back to, is that these cosmologies and these myths, they're establishing a logos in the universe. They're stable meanings in the universe. And even with the creation myth, it's not an account of how the universe began. It's an account of being and how stable meanings exist in being via the logos, via the let there be light. And so we got Marduk, we got Logos, we got the craftsman deity, and so these are all read as personifications of the structuring activity of consciousness and culture. So myth binds this cosmological, this psychological, and the social together in a single narrative. How the world began, how the mind works, and how society should be ordered are all facets of the same meaning structure. Okay, so why I'm starting here, and why I think this is an important way to do this investigation, is we really can't talk about like ethics from a theological point of view right now. No one believes in God. No one believes in religion. So we have to start somewhere else. We have to start with the phenomenological. And so this is where Peterson excelled. Peterson did a great job establishing the logos, not merely as a Christian idea, but as part of evolutionary psychology. And so he really rooted it into the neurology of how we respond to the world, how our incarnate being in the world comes with a package of meaning already. And this is what we lose in deconstructionism and also moral relativism ultimately. In order to get to the the moral meaning of things, we have to first have a metaphysical meaning of things. So we have to first have the logos before we can start talking about moral behaviors. And right now, we don't really have like any universal ethical structure that everyone believes in, because we also don't have a universal mythological or logo structure that everyone believes in. We've lost connection with the world itself. We've desacralized the world. We've taken the gods out of them, and we've put everything into the virtual now, where none of these, when I'm playing a video game and I'm afraid I'm going to get shot, it's not the same as sitting at a fire and being afraid of a snake in the dark, right? Like, there's no real threat in that virtual realm. And so this further, I think, leads to the erosion of these objective meaning structures that were understood by all. Okay, so if we have then established that we're in this postmodern state where there is no universally accepted cosmological structure, mythological structure, any stable system of meaning that we all agree the universe is made from and behaves according to, this then leads us into this deconstruction where even those places where it did exist, such as religion and mythology, those have become deconstructed. So, the feminists have turned it all into, it's all patriarchy. Homer's all about patriarchy. The Marxists have, turned it all into their own mythology, incidentally, about, the oppressor, the oppressed, the capitalist came. So, what we're kind of left with then is just this flat being that has no meaning to it, and in that it's the flux of the ancients, of what is it, Heraclitus. So we've kind of returned to this Heraclitean flux where there's just a river that's constantly flowing, but there's nothing in that river, and that's what existence is. And we're just putting social constructs in the river, but they just disintegrate one after another. Nothing retains as time goes by or as existence continues. And so this leads us to kind of a Nietzschean mentality where all that exists is this will to power, that the only force in the universe, all the gods are dead, the only force in the universe is power. And so one prominent reconstruction of Nietzsche's will to power is that it's a metaphysical force that makes up the whole universe, such that will to power are in a never-ending competition, and as a result, continuous change occurs. What appears as becoming is the outcome of conflict among these wills. Change is dependent upon which will to power is successful in overcoming the resistance put forth by the competing will to power. Nietzsche rejects enduring substances and insists that there is only a fixed amount of force, but it is in essence in flux. The world is thus a finite totality of forces that ceaselessly reconfigure themselves through an antagonistic contest. So this leads to his idea of eternal recurrence, which I'm not going to make a strong argument for here, but just to kind of flesh out the idea a little bit. Eternal recurrence is the temporal form of this ontology. If the total quality of forces is fixed but endlessly reconfiguring and time extends without limit, then Nietzsche suggests all possible configurations must reoccur infinitely often in the same sequence. So this is what you're kind of left with if you don't have an afterlife and you don't have logos. Then everything that exists has already existed for an infinite amount of time, and if it's existed for an infinite amount of time, then all configurations of things have already happened, and so we're just going through another cycle of these reconfigurations happening continuously. I mean, we kind of get into that with the multiverse idea, in Marvel and stuff like that. So it's the same more or less idea. Eternal reoccurrence is in this sense a logical consequence of this Heraclitean flux combined with the finitude that the world is nothing but becoming. Yet, because the underlying forces are neither created or annihilated, the pattern of their struggle repeats. As one commentator puts it, Nietzsche bases a metaphysics of the eternal recurrence on his reverence for the Heraclitist cosmology of flux and unity of opposites, so that Nietzsche's will to power is what eternally recurs. This has two crucial implications for the problem of meaning. First, it abolishes any appeal to stable being or eternal forms as ground of meaning. There is no transcendent logos, no immutable realm of essences, no metaphysical substrate that could fix the meaning of things once and for all. There is only the ceaseless struggle of forces, the eternal strife in which every apparent identity is contingent and temporary. Second, it ties meaning intrinsically to power. If the world is willed to power all the way down, then meanings are not discovered in a neutral reality. They are the products of successful configurations of power. Foucault will later develop this and put it in a different idiom. He'll say power and knowledge are mutually constructive and constitutive. What counts as truth is inseparable from the forces that impose and sustain it. Okay, so you get a very, very cynical understanding of the world when you get into Foucault, that everything just becomes power. There is no world to know. It's just knowledge itself is something that has, and we're getting this in our culture today already. It's science is a white man's construct. That the interpretation and bias of a particular class and gender are creating a power, construct that they call science, and they're imposing that upon you. Okay, so this is all very present stuff for us right now. This is what I'm trying to, I hope, bring to light. On this Nietzschean Heraclitean view, the world is fundamentally a play of forces without any form. All structures, identities, and values are provisional crystallizations in the flux. Eternal recurrence radicalizes this further. Not only is there no final redemption or stable ground, but the entire antagonistic play is destined to repeat endlessly. This is the metaphysical backdrop against which postmodernism and contemporary media can be understood, not as the causes of the loss of logo, but as the historical cultural form in which this Heraclitean universe of flux and will to power become explicitly visible. So what my thesis is, that I've been trying to demonstrate, is mass media has created a space for this world to exist. Before this Nietzschean world was too resisted by just lived experience. It's nice to say that all science is power until you get sick and you need medicine, right? Well, as we spend most of our time now on the internet, and we're not dealing with real human problems, we're not dealing with fears of snakes, we're not dealing with what lurks in the dark, we're not dealing with wars that we have to fight in. Everything becomes a spectacle. So the wars are something that's happening on TV, and the realm of this kind of non-fixed meaning can exist there, and everything can just be a narrative. Everything can just be reinterpreted, and that's what we're seeing with, I think, a lot of media. Everything's just reframed endlessly. That's what we're seeing on YouTube. Anything that someone says, someone else is going to put out another video that says just the opposite, and then 10 other people are going to put out videos that say the opposite until this force of will wins. And that's why everything's so combative. If there is no truth, all that's left is just fighting things out all the time. And so that's why everyone on the internet is frothing mad all the time, is because there's only your side. There's only your will to power in this whole symbolic world now. There's this flattened symbolic world where there is no stable objective meaning to anything. If all meaning can be fought over and all meaning can be created through power, then it just comes down to who can recruit the most power for something to have a determined meaning. Okay, so next we will explore how this is happening in media, kind of what I was already going on about, but we'll go a little bit. We'll go in depth on Foucault and how once we killed God, it wasn't just that we lost religion, that we put everything into a flux, and that flux now has turned everything into a constant war of meaning, because there's nothing to discover, there's only meaning to create. So mass media, narrative warfare, and the destabilization of meaning. If Nietzsche and Heraclitus named the metaphysical conditions of a world without stable being, contemporary mass media, especially digital and social media, roughly since the 2010s, have materialized this condition at a level of everyday experience. So this would have been something that philosophers and academics would have worried about, but now it's in your face all the time, on the news every night, on YouTube, on Twitter or X, any one of the social media platforms. You now have to live in this flux of power, this metaphysical, this theoretical metaphysics that academics would have pondered about. We've now manifested and live in. So we live in this flux of power that Nietzsche had attributed to the cosmos, but we live in as the media environment. It instantiates as a continuous struggle over narrative, frames, and interpretations. The world does not first appear as a neutral sequence of events and only later receive a spin. Rather, events emerge into our consciousness already embedded in a competing discourse, each seeking to stabilize their meaning. So we already come with these pre-framed sources. Like if you're watching Fox News or CNN, you already know the frame. Then the events happen within the frame. Okay, it's not like we look at the event and then we try to make sense of it and then we go, what's the best frame for it? And so, everything is Orange Man bad on CNN. Everything's racism. And I think that's also kind of an important aspect, that why I think racism has now become the predominant narrative is we don't have a universal ethics anymore. The only shared ethics we have is racism is bad. We have a little bit of a historical narrative about Hitler, that Hitler was bad. No one knows what fascism or anything about the Nazis. They just know Hitler was Satan. And that's part of our cosmology. Hitler's Satan. Everything not Hitler. Everything not mass killing and Gestapo and SS is good. And so we don't have a positive progression. We're not progressing to anything. We're progressing away from, right? It's like a repulsion from. And that's our idea of what progression is, away from the dark, evil Hitler. And I hadn't argued this before. We're losing that. I mean, the younger generations don't care about Hitler. Hitler's might as well be Dracula to them. So we're going to have to create a new framework of what good and evil is. But right now, the only moral framework we have is objectively, Hitler is the center of the universe. Hitler is evil. Fascism is the center of the universe. Fascism is evil. And racism is our only ethical standard. Don't be racist. Everything else is up for grabs. You want to be a polygamist, you want to get married, you don't want to be married, whatever kind of sexuality you want to do. Heck, even we're kind of allowing political killings now, like, hey, you kill the CEO of a pharmaceutical, or excuse me, healthcare. Well, you're a good guy now. So violence is itself not objectively evil anymore, right? Like violence itself is up for interpretation. Killing innocent people is up for interpretation. There's now, these are like the fundamentals. Like if you say it's okay to kill innocent people, like what the hell are we doing now? Like we have to get back to some sort of like stable ethical norms. And I think the internet's just accelerating this because again, we're creating this discourse of power rather than a discourse of meaning. So the world does not appear, as I have mentioned. So Foucault's account of power and discourse is inseparable from a theorizing this condition. For Foucault, power is not merely representative, but it's productive. It produces reality. It produces domains of objects and rituals of truth. discourse is the medium through which this productive power operates. It shapes not only what can be said, but what can be seen, known, experienced, and talked about as real. So contemporary analysis of media representations, drawing on Foucault, emphasize that everything we see or hear in the media has been constructed, and that what appears as reality is in fact a mediated representation shaped by institutional and discursive interest. Right, so corporate media, in short, right? Like, the corporations aren't gonna let you talk too negatively about pharmaceuticals if the advertisements are all for pharmaceutical brands. And we're not going to talk bad about Coca-Cola if all the advertisements are Coca-Cola, right? So media discourse does not simply mirror events, it constitutes them as intelligible and significant. And so again, this is part of the editing. I forget that news source that all the other YouTubers talk about, but you can put in an event and then you can see what Republican news sources say and Democrat news sources, and there's just events that don't even come up on the other side. I think one that's happening right now is the Somalia corruption in Minnesota, because there's a racial angle to it. The Democrats won't touch it because it's only racism. Whereas the Republicans, this is like the hugest issue in the world. It's like, between $1 and $9 billion that has been lost. Now, if it was state money, it would just kind of be like, it would make sense that no one pays attention to it. Like, okay, whatever's going on in Minnesota, that's their business. But it's federal money, which means the federal government's paying for these things. And they're pretty horrendous things to be doing. Like, it's stealing from kids, essentially. It's stealing from autistic kids, from hungry kids. It's all using this human shield of children. We need money for the children. And then it all gets embezzled and smuggled away, right? But that's not significant to you, according to the media, because the media doesn't just tell you what's going on in the world; they tell you what the world is, like what events have meaning in the world and what events don't have meaning in the world. That event doesn't have meaning in the world. You shouldn't look at it. You shouldn't pay attention to it. So, two structural features of digital media intensifies this Foucaultian dynamic. First, algorithmic architecture, which privilege engagement, outrage, novelty, emotional intensity over coherence or truth. So it thereby rewards narratives that polarize and simplify. I mean, this again, just go on YouTube. It's just filled with that. Second, the lowering of barriers to entry, multiple narratives. So everybody can make a narrative now. Like, I can make my own narrative. I am kind of making my own narrative, I guess you could say. So you got states, corporations, NGOs, influencers, bots, and ordinary people like myself are all participating in what has been described as a global war of narratives, in which social media have become a primary battlefield for competing interpretations of events. The result is not a pluralistic public sphere converging on shared facts, but a permanent contest over what every event means, in which meaning remains perpetually unstable. So a few big events, just easy one, January 6th. I won't go into detail on it, but I'll try to stay to less controversial ones. So in the last 15 years, we had the mostly peaceful protests, right? The lexical framing in the battle over reality. So during the wave of the protests in the 2020, the phrase mostly peaceful protests became a focal point of media controversy. The same empirical events, mass demonstrations, some peaceful, some involving property damage, and clashes with the police, were reported under radically different frames. One cluster of media outlets emphasizes the peaceful majority and the legitimacy of protest, using mostly peaceful to stress the proportionality and to resist narratives that equated protest with riot. Another will cluster on instances of violence and looting and treating mostly peaceful as a euphemism or a deceptive label that conceals the truth of the events. So from a Foucaultian perspective, this is not merely a disagreement over adjectives, but a struggle over the regime of truth. What is the event? Right? The event didn't happen. The event is what we make the event to be. It is primarily an expression of democratic grievance or primary breakdown of law and order. Critical media analysis shows that lexical choices, image selection, and sequencing of footage function as discursive techniques that construct realities and reinforce social political hierarchies through linguistic choices. The same footage, crowds, police lines, burning crowds, they can all be woven into incompatible narratives, each supported by its own ecosystems of commentary, expert opinion, and user-generated comment. I would also say, like, if you watch how frequent an event comes up on the media, so, I'm trying to think of a good, someone gets shot, right? Maybe in one media they'll kind of mention it, yeah, so-and-so got shot. In another media, it's every night, new turn of events, new interview. So they're constantly keeping your focus on it. And it's not new information. They're always burying the lead. There's nothing, like maybe his aunt said something or something, right? So they're trying to, again, emphasize the importance of this event because that's part of their narrative. The phenomenological impact is decisive. For different audiences, the same protest is lived as a different world. There is no neutral shared event. There are only mediated appearances embedded in specific discursive formations. Meaning here is not discovered but imposed. And the imposition is inseparable from power, editorial power, platform power, and the diffuse power of network publicities. The other one I still am baffled and run into is the Kyle Rittenhouse one. Like, you hear people from both sides describe what happened there, and you can watch them, same stuff, and you're going to get completely different stories, right? So this is what I'm talking about. This, like, we're bringing these framings into our own perceptions. We can't perceive the world without this, like, media framework that we're wearing in our brains to digest reality for us. The other one that came up was, of course, the Joe Rogan ivermectin one. So the controversy surrounding Joe Rogan's use of ivermectin, it's at its empirical core. Rogan took ivermectin, including a formulation that was approved for humans. So he wasn't taking the horse version. He had a doctor. He was taking the human version alongside other treatments. And this was rapidly subsumed into this symbolic battle over expertise, misinformation, and bodily autonomy. Some media characterized ivermectin as a horse dewormer, framing Rogan's actions as emblematic of anti-scientific recklessness, and others contended that this framing was itself a form of misinformation, emphasizing that the ivermectin has legitimate human use and casting Rogan as a victim of the hostile establishment. So the analysis of misinformation dynamics and competitive media environments suggests that media competition fuels the spread of misinformation by incentivizing sensational or polarizing framings that capture attention even when they distort nuance. So they're incentivized to make it like this. In this context, the horse dewormer label functions as a discursive device. It condenses a complex pharmacological and regulatory debate into a vivid image that delegitimizes a particular practice and, by extension, a particular cluster of identities: podcast listeners, vaccine skeptics, populist critics. It's 6 degrees of separation. Oh, you listen to Joe Rogan? Well, you're a fascist because Elon Musk once made what looked like a Nazi salute, and he listens to Joe Rogan, and so if you listen to Joe Rogan, it's not just about decrediting Joe Rogan, it's about decrediting a whole part of the population. And I think, the kind of the silliness of it, if you frame things like that, you might as well say Joe Rogan drinks nuclear reacting coolant. Yeah, he drinks water. That's what cools nuclear reactors, right? You can make everything sound awful if you play with the words enough. And then the other big one, and I won't go too into detail this, but just the Russia-Ukraine. Same thing. Yeah, whoever you ask, you're going to get a whole different story about that. Or Israel, Gaza, right? So, to kind of finish up then, from logos to flux, media as a experiential metaphysics. These examples illustrate how the contemporary media environment translates a Nietzschean Heraclitean metaphysics of flux into an experiential form, into a world where there is no stable being, only becoming and will to power. Meaning cannot be anchored in a transcendental logos. It must be continually fought over by competing forces. Digital media makes this visible. Every event is immediately inserted into a battlefield of narratives where meaning is contingent on discursive success. The contrast with postmodern mythic symbolic orders is stark. There, as the phenomenological tradition emphasizes, meaning was extrapolated from the world and stabilized in shared symbols. Light as truth, the heavens as transcendent, the underworld as death, order as divine law. These symbolic structures were not invulnerable to contest, but they provided a relatively stable horizon on which events could be interpreted. So yeah, I mean, you have Virgil interprets a myth, you have Homer interprets a myth. The poets interpreted the myth, but they were still, you couldn't interpret Jupiter as Saturn, right? There was still something, there was a kernel that remained stable, that had to be what it was. In the contemporary media situation, by contrast, there is no such shared horizon. Instead, there is a constantly shifting set of overlapping, often incompatible regimes of truth, none of which can claim uncontested authority. From a Nietzschean vantage point, this is not accidental, but a symptom of a deeper historical movement, that the death of God and the collapse of metaphysics and what that world had guaranteed for meaning. The postmodern media condition is the cultural technological form in which this metaphysical truth becomes a phenomenological fact of everyday life. So God is dead to you because you're using a media that exists in a horizon where God is dead. Meaning there is no objective signifier, there's no meaning giver to the universe, and the media is the place where all meaning is subjective. All meaning is up for debate, where it is most evident to you, and that's where you're supposed to be getting your information about, like, practical things in your own life. How are groceries doing, and what's the stocks doing, and should I send my kids to private school? Like, you're supposed to make practical choices on information which is just being manufactured by ideologies and warring narratives. So the world is experienced as this Heraclitean flux. Power is experienced as the only constant. Meaning is experienced not as something discovered, but as something manufactured, defended, and easily contested. In this sense, mass media does not merely report on a Nietzschean universe, they enact it. The timelines, the feeds, the trending topics of the digital age are the visible surface of an underlying struggle of wills to power, in which narratives rise and falls, identities coalesce and fragment, and no story can finally secure its claim to be the story of what it is.